Okay, today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about foreground, midground, background. What we're talking about is three different levels, layers that we would look at when we're looking at a picture. So right now, foreground is the part of the image that is the closest to us, and the background would be the images that are the furthest away. And then whatever is in between those two parts is end up what we call the middle ground. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to make a landscape. We're going to take that midground, foreground, background that we just kind of discussed and had a little view of, and take it and let's see what we can do with it. I'm going to do a watercolor today. So I'm going to use my paints, and I'll probably get a chance to talk about those too. But first what we're going to do is we'll set up our foreground, midground, background. I am going to be using a harder paper. This is a nice thick paper, so I call this my watercolor paper. I'm going to use a pencil, and in a few minutes I'll show you my paint set. So first what I'm going to do is think about what I want in my foreground, and I'm going to do a seascape. So I'm gonna have some ocean. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be whimsical. And then in the background, I have my sun maybe setting. And that way I have some paint going on there. So my first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna think about what I want in my foreground. So my foreground is gonna be a lot bigger. It's gonna be closer to me. So that is gonna be my main focus right here in the front. And then I'll have my sea in the middle, and then I'll have my sun in the background. So right here, I think I'm gonna start my foreground right here. And I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make a little hill, and it goes down in front. And from that hill, I am going to draw a palm tree. And I'm kind of just drawing the lines where I want him. And then from the palm tree, out behind my palm tree, I'm going to have my ocean. And I'm just making some lines for waves. I'm going to actually end up tracing everything later on, probably with my black pen. And then behind there, I'm going to have, I'm going to actually go up a little bit higher. I'm going to do one more wave back here with my ocean. And then way back here, I'm going to have my sun rising or setting, usually a nice little sunset. And I like to take my sun and I like to put it someplace. I usually try not to put it in my corners. And I always like to try and play around with the rays on my sun. I always like my sun to have like big rays for everyone to see. And that way it's much more fun to color too. So we can have that sun, and then the rays are going to start going all the way up. Okay, so, and they don't have to be the same. Maybe I'll go a little bit that way. And I think those are going to be part of my sunset. So those are going to be nice, big, huge waves. So now I have my foreground, my hill with my palm tree, my midground, my ocean, my background, my sun. All right. So here are my tools for painting. I have my water, I have my brush, I have my paint palette. I've cleaned it off just in case I want to start mixing, and then some napkins to wipe my brush off. I'll try and make sure that you can see some of the techniques that I'm using. If you haven't already watched the how-to paint video, then I suggest you watch that before we get into this, but you could probably pick up a couple small things by watching this also. Okay, so I'm going to set this up and get my paint started. All right, so painting. Like I said before, I am going to go back in and use black marker over this. I've got my brush. I've wiped it into the water. I've taken some paint off, wiped it twice. This is watercolor paper, so it absorbs really well. I'm going to start with the foreground, go to my midground, and then paint my background. So I think I'm going to use some fun colors and just kind of play around with the edges. And just by dipping my brush into the water, I can start spreading this out. I am going to put a little brown into this too, because it is a hill. Again, just going right back and forth between water and my green, cleaning, wiping it on there. I'm gonna put a little yellow in with all these colors. You can see just by going back and forth, I'm gonna make that look like a point. So I'm going along my edge, blending. There we go. My foreground is somewhat finished. I'm gonna head out to, I'm gonna let this dry. So while this is drying, I'm gonna skip my sea and I'm gonna go out to my sun. If you want, you could also just wait for this to dry and then go to the sea. But since I have this wet, I'm gonna kind of skip. So if I've painted one thing, I don't wanna paint two things close to one another because then they sometimes start to mix. So I'm gonna go out to my sky, and that's gonna be a big sunset out there. So I'm definitely gonna start with a little yellow in my sun. Put a little yellow out here, and I'm gonna blend it in later on. So I can put little dabs of yellow here and there. Remember, I'm using my watercolor, so it definitely helps a little bit. And so I'm gonna clean off my brush, get into my orange. And start to pull in some orange in between here. Some places might have a little bit more orange than others. And then some areas might have a little orange buildup. And I'm gonna add some red. Not too much, because that red red can be really strong. Might make some more of the red come down along the edge of the ocean where the sun is either setting or rising. So now I'm going to a little bit more red up here. I forgot this spot up here. So see how, now if you remember from our color lesson, what colors make orange, yellow, and red. So when I start to blend all these colors in with just water, I've just got my brush. When I start using the water on my brush and start blending these colors in, they'll blend in really nice because these colors are friends with one another. They make up one another. They get along. My warm colors definitely understand each other, so they are good to go. So you can see just by spreading it out with some water. Now again, I am using a watercolor paper. So this is very, very forgiving. It's fun. Sometimes you can get it inexpensive at Hobby Lobby. I think I bought this book of watercolor, maybe it's 20 pages, and I think I got it for $5. So save up your money, and maybe you can get one of those, because they are fun to use. And the paper that sometimes we use at school just doesn't stick together as well. But you can see how this picture is starting to be nice and strong. And if I think I need some more colors later on, I can always go back in, but you can see how it's really, really light. And it's a very soft picture. You could do this with crayons. I could go in with crayons on top of this. And I keep on trying to make sure that all the colors go from that big center sun right there. All right. I'm gonna let this dry for a little while and then I'm gonna go into my ocean and finish up my palm tree. Okay, so here I've worked for a little while. I finished up my painting. So I have all set, my foreground, my midground, my background, and it really doesn't have too much in it at all. I like to, after it's completely dry, I like to go in and I'll play around with putting a little marker in there. I've got a fine line marker. Sometimes I'll do double lines. So you can see, I like to play around with that. And I'm just doing wiggly lines. They don't have to be perfect. Maybe I'll let them fade in. Here's my final picture. Again, I just add a little bit of marker into it. You can add crayon, you can use colored pencil. You can even draw on it a little bit more after you have all of that stuff done. I hope you like this one. We will be looking forward to another foreground, midground, background. We'll do a couple of these, just different medias and everything. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Any questions, make sure you reach out to me. Have fun.